Welcome into the show, everyone. Christian Jackson here with a very special guest, Paul Frischner. He's the host of Rebound Rundown and the host of the Pitino Show with new Xavier coach Richard Pitino. And he does play-by-play for Xavier, so he is our expert for today. Paul, thanks for joining me.
I appreciate it. Always great to talk to you, Christian. How you doing, man?
I'm good, and I'm excited to talk about this new era of Xavier basketball. I know last year there was a lot of hype entering the season, and this season you don't have the roster, but it's a changing of the guard. Before we dive into these pieces, I kind of want to zoom out a bit. What are your thoughts on the departure of Sean Miller, and what are your thoughts on the hire of Richard Pitino?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that Sean Miller leaving caught a lot of people off guard. I don't think it was something that anybody really expected after he came back to Xavier 3 years ago. But in the changing landscape of college basketball, I think it's pretty clear, from what has gone on over the last couple of seasons. You look at the year that the SEC had, you look at some of the things that have given the Big East some trouble. I would assume that Sean felt he had a better chance at this stage in his career, where he's been around for a long time. He's been in college game for decades now, that he wants to get to a Final Four, and he felt like the best chance to get to a Final Four in as efficient of a time as possible was to go to the SEC, which had a historically great year last year, and he went to Texas. And so Xavier hired on the younger side. Now they go to Richard Pitino, who has over a decade of college coaching. He's just in his young 40s, but he gets hired as a 29-year-old at FIU. He spends all those years at Minnesota. He's a Big Ten Coach of the Year. He's a Mountain West Coach of the Year with New Mexico, and he spends 4 years there. So it's a dramatic shift and change in philosophy at Xavier. It's the first time that Xavier's really hired outside of the Musketeer family in the last couple of decades. So, you went Sean Miller to then his assistant Chris Mack to his assistant Travis Steele, back to Sean Miller. It's been a while since Xavier's gone and made an outside hire like this. I think Pitino is very personable. He's very witty. He's very sarcastic. He's very engaging on social media with the fan base. I think Xavier fans are going to grow to know and really enjoy Richard Pitino as their head coach. But as far as what is going on the court this year, I think, we'll get into more of that. And those are some question marks that they'll have to answer as a team this year. But as far as the future of the program and what Richard Pitino brings, I think, like I just said, he's very engaging and somebody that wants to involve the whole fan base and make people feel like they're part of the program. And in this day and age, with all of the turnover, sometimes that's hard to do. I feel like he's somebody cut out to do that.
Stylistically, at New Mexico, his teams were top 22 in tempo each of his 4 years there. Something interesting to me, though, is that's not necessarily what he was doing at Minnesota. Do you think that stylistic change was, a byproduct of we're going to another league, the players I'm recruiting, like a lower league, like in the Mountain West, this is my way to win? Do you think he's going to try to carry that identity over to Xavier? Do you think it's going to really kind of just mold to the personnel that he has?
Yeah, in fact, I just published a video earlier today from the Pitino Show. We launched the first episode last week, and we were talking earlier this week, actually. All the time runs together when you're this close to the season, Christian. But when you're looking at what he's done over the course of his career and how he's evolved and the pace that he runs with, he's talked a lot about his coaching mentors. And yeah, sure, he's the son of one of the greatest college coaches of all time, but he also coached under Billy Donovan at Florida, and he took a lot of advice and best practices from him. And he really calls on Billy for a lot of, when he talks about the mentors, Billy is the first name that he'll mention whenever you ask him that question. As far as specifically this year or what a Pitino team looks like, something I've consistently talked about through the offseason is what his offense looks like. And it'll be very similar to what Sean Miller ran at Xavier, because Sean Miller, Mark Few, Tommy Lloyd, the Gonzaga style flow offense, that's what Xavier wants to run. But defensively, it's something very different than Xavier fans are used to, right? They were always a pack line style team that wanted to, close out hard on shooters, but you're not going to get as much into the paint. It was a very different style than what you'll see now, where you have more height at the rim. You have Pop Njai, who's a 7-footer. Cason Westfall's a freshman. Probably won't see a ton of minutes this year, but he's a 7-foot freshman. You also have Anthony Robinson, who I don't know what he's listed at, but probably 6'10", 6'11", somewhere in there, and much bigger physically, much stronger than a couple of those other guys down low. So those to give you some options in Pop Njai and Anthony Robinson, where defensively under Pitino, he wants to filter you to the rim and he wants to block shots. He can jump out in passing lanes, and if he doesn't get to steal, he's going to get you to the rim and he's going to block shots. That's defensively what Pitino wants to do. And then on the other side, like I said, offensively, speed it up. I don't know where Xavier's going to fall offensively at the end of the year. I know what pace they're going to want to play at. I'm just not sure this year if they have the dudes to really execute that at the level that Pitino would like.
Starting with Roddy Anderson, who redshirted last year, the one retaining player coming from Boise State, so a guy that Pitino was familiar with from the Mountain West. What was Roddy Anderson's redshirt year like? And, was that relationship of competing against Pitino a reason why he stayed?
Yeah, I think Roddy, when he came to Xavier, would have been last June in the summer of 24, right? You had a pretty good backcourt already there. You had Trey Green, you had Davion McKnight, you had Ryan Conwell, you had players already established in the backcourt. And Roddy Anderson was coming off starter minutes for an NCAA tournament team in Boise State. And he chose to redshirt. And he wanted to improve his shot. He plays extremely fast. He redshirted for a year under Sean Miller. So he already has the tempo style of this offense down. He's already learned what it means to play in this offense. And now he has to go out and execute it. I do think that Pitino was attracted to the fact that he redshirted for a year in that system and the fact that he's experienced and what it could mean to play under him. And now he obviously hasn't. He's competed against him. But I don't know if Boise State was the right fit for Roddy in the way that he can play in his skill set. I think Richard Pitino's offense will bring that out of him more. I don't know what kind of numbers shooting the ball Roddy will put up this year, but I will tell you, having watched him for a year in practice, he is a much better shooter now than he was in June of 2024. Now, does that translate onto the court when he's playing somebody finally who's wearing a different jersey than him? We'll see. But at least in practice and in competitive segments in practice, he is shooting the ball much better than he has been over the last year. And that was a huge reason why he wanted a red shirt.
Typically, I have a plan for these of at least the first few guys of who I want to ask about first. But to be honest, I really don't know where to go right next, Paul. You got a lot of guys coming from the major ranks. Some guys who I'm familiar with, like Bravichin from New Mexico, Trey Carroll from Fort Atlantic, Anthony Robinson from Virginia. Everyone else, there's a lot of mystery boxes for me here personally. I kind of want to throw it to you. Who are the key guys on this team? Who do you expect to be the leaders and the best players? Yeah,
Trey Carroll was the leading scorer against Murray State. And I feel like if Xavier's going to be good this year, they're going to need to lean on his experience to be a good player. Jovan Milicevic has shot the ball very well in practice. I don't know how his skill set will translate to the Big East. That's one of the big things I'm keeping an eye on because he can shoot it, but can the way that he plays translate to the Big East? Philip Borvichinen as well. Both of those guys transferred from New Mexico, so they know Pitino's style, and you can see that when they practice. They know where to be. They know how to hit their spots. They know what they're trying to do. The exhibition against Murray State was clunky offensively because it felt like guys were out of position. I mean, Xavier scored 70 points, and I think almost 25 points came from the free throw line. So it wasn't a very efficient game from Xavier that didn't shoot. I think they only made 2 threes, didn't shoot the ball very well. Anthony Robinson is somebody down low that I'm really looking at. If this Xavier season is not record wise, what Xavier fans are hoping that it would be as a standard under this program, right? It's probably going to be a season where Xavier finishes around 500. I think I have Xavier probably finishing somewhere in the 16 and 15 range. That's not an NCAA tournament team. So what can you do? What kind of positives can you take? Anthony Robinson is one of those because he has shown flashes of athleticism. I think he needs to develop his scoring in the post, kind of develop those post moves and show flashes around the basket, but he can block shots, he can rebound, and he's a big body. So I'm looking at guys that have multiple years of eligibility. I think Malik Messina Moore might end up being the best player on this team, right behind or right with Trey Carroll, maybe a step behind him. But Malik Messina Moore only has 1 year of eligibility. Trey Carroll only has 1 year of eligibility. Philip Borovichnin from New Mexico only has 1 year of eligibility. When you start to go down the roster, you're thinking to yourself, let's look at the guys that have multiple years and can come back and you can build around. I know it's the transfer portal era. You might not keep everybody, but at least the thought of, hey, this guy could come back and we could have something if he chooses to stay.
Gabriel Posado from Evansville. I know he tore his meniscus. Do you have details on how he's doing?
No real update. He tore his meniscus over the summer, had to get surgery on it. It's been reported that I would be shocked to see him play in conference play. And then anything beyond that, could it linger the entire season? Maybe. Could he come back in January? Maybe. I mean, these are just questions we don't have an answer to, right? And everybody's looking to Posado because out of the offseason, you felt like that was the blue chip piece that a lot of other teams were after, that you could build something around. And again, another guy that has multiple years of eligibility, him alongside All Right. They were right there for Missouri Valley Freshman of the Year last year. All Right, who's on Xavier's team. He won Freshman of the Year. Posado was right there with him. Posado's super athletic. He can shoot. He can get to the rim. He can dunk. Does a lot of things really well. So if Xavier gets him to the floor, the one thing I will say about Posado is, and I don't know this. This is purely speculation on my part. I have not talked to anybody within the program about this. But, if Posado gets to a point, Christian, in, let's say, mid-January, where he's able to play, and you might say to yourself, well, don't burn a year of eligibility if Xavier at that point is, 8-8 on the season. Don't burn a year. Just keep your 3 years and come back next year. I'd like to see Posado play if he is healthy by mid-January, because then if he's capable of playing at the Big East level. And Xavier's January and February is super challenging. So can you play at the Big East level? Are you truly somebody that you do want to build around in the future? I think those are important questions to answer. And when you have 3 years left, it's not like you're burning your last year, right? I mean, I think it's a different story than somebody like Jerome Hunter 2 years ago, who was coming back from a heart attack over the summer and was cleared to practice and everything, but he didn't end up playing. And then he tore his Achilles. So it was kind of a moot point. But it's different when you have 3 years of eligibility left. So to me, with Posado, I would love to see him play this season if he's eligible, or if he's healthy. He's eligible, but if he's healthy to play. But as far as the injury goes, nothing has changed from the fact that he's just still working his way back.
Is there a guy that you're like, if there was a stock market of where these guys came in from the portal, that you think was like the best value, or that you think is someone that is going to surprise a lot of people, whether it's this year or just in the future?
Let me think here. If there's a good under the radar answer that I haven't mentioned yet. I mean,
or it could even be someone like if you think an All Right wasn't valued as highly as, the upside that you see in him. Really just anyone that stuck out to you as just someone you're really excited about.
Again, it's tough because he only has 1 year of eligibility, but I really like the game that Malik Messina Moore has. When you're building for the future, you can't build around somebody that only has 1 year left. But when I watch him in practice, it always seems like he makes the right pass. He glides around the floor. He was a 40% 3-point shooter in two of his 3 years prior to Xavier, so he can shoot the ball really well. To me, he seems like just that player who's calm and under control and can play the sport at a high level. But of the players that have multiple years of eligibility left, I guess I would lean Posado if he can come back this season. I feel like he's somebody that you really want to see something out of, because if he really does perform at the level that the offseason hype led to, then you have something going forward.
Is there a best case scenario where things really click and someone, whether it's Messina Moore or somebody else, really breaks out? What is, in your most optimistic view of this team, like a best case scenario of not just an output of wins and losses, but just in terms of how good this team can be in competing with some of the cream of the crop of the league?
It's tough this year with the Big East because to me it feels like tier 1 and 2 is UConn and St. John's, and then you have Creighton, who's probably going to be like a top 20 team, I would say. I'm higher on Creighton than it sounds like some people are, but I really like this Creighton team this year, and I think Greg McDermott's one of the best coaches in the country, and I think he only has a year or two left, so he's going to want to make a run here coming down the stretch of his career. But I look at the rest of the league, and I think in my absolute most optimistic view of Xavier, I would say that they finish 6th or 7th in the league. Because if you think about it this way, if you break it down, you're probably, this Xavier team likely is going to go 0-6 against Creighton, St. John's, and UConn, right? I mean, that's, if we're just calling it like it is, that's probably the way this season is going to play out. If the most likely scenario there is maybe they could get like Creighton at home, but at best they would go 1-5 against those teams. Okay. So if you look at it that way, say they go 0-6, now you have 14 games against the rest of the conference. Can they go 9-5 against the rest of the conference? Is this team good enough to do that when you think about it from that angle? I don't know. And that's where you could get to maybe that 6th spot. I would say this team probably is somewhere in that 7 range at my ceiling with this team. But, I guess if things break right and they can shoot the ball well, maybe Providence falters this year, or maybe Marquette, who didn't bring in a single transfer, isn't as good as some people are saying that they'll be. Maybe DePaul doesn't take the step that DePaul fans are hoping they will. Seton Hall is still at the basement of the league. And all of a sudden you start to stack a couple of wins in there, and then things break your way. You get some tiebreakers, and you find yourself in that 6 or 7 spot. But I think this is more of a 8, 9, 10 type team for Xavier.
Yeah, it's just tough to throw an entirely new roster together. We've seen it work in a couple places where a first-year coach kind of comes in at the high major Power 5 level and is able to make it work, but it's just asking a lot. It's kind of just, a successful season for Xavier in a typical season. It just doesn't look the same this year. It's just putting too much on Pitino. I feel like that's fair to say, right? Do you think the fan base understands that to the extent of if you are a frisky out at home, against Big East competition, and you're able to beat the lesser teams on your schedule, like does that count as a successful season, a step in the right direction, where next year with the resources in order and high school recruiting and just being more entrenched with this program, that things can look better next year?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think as long as things are, you can tell that things are trending in the right direction, right? And this isn't like a 10 or 11 win team. If you get up in that, I think 17 wins would be a massive success for this team. I think a 17-14 season for this team, you could almost convince me that that's bubbly. It's maybe that's wrong. It would depend on where those 17, maybe who knows where those 17 wins come from, and if you pick up anything in the non-conference. But like if you can go on the road and get Iowa early in the season, right? I mean, there's a first-year head coach at Iowa, right? If you can, that's a really good coach as well. It's not like you're picking up somebody who's brand new to the Division I ranks, but you kind of look at it and you say, okay, if maybe you could pick up a win against Georgia and in Charleston. You win the crosstown shootout at home. Xavier hasn't lost the crosstown shootout at home since the first shootout at the Cintas Center back in 2000, whatever that was, 2001. It's been over almost 25 years since Xavier has lost to Cincinnati in their own building. So, and there've been some games. I mean, 2 years ago, I don't know if anybody outside of Xavier fans would have picked Xavier to beat Cincinnati 2 years ago. Cincinnati was favored on Xavier's home floor 2 seasons ago, and Xavier still won that game. So, if you can sneak a couple of those in there and make it an interesting season, then yeah, I think Xavier fans, they're a knowledgeable fan base. They understand what Pitino has here. They understand the what he's trying to do. And I mean, put simply, next offseason, he's going to have the resources available to him to succeed because, for the first time in a long time, Xavier's in the bottom half of the conference as far as resources and NIL goes. So Xavier's going to have to step up their game going forward if they want to compete with the top dogs of the conference. I think that Xavier's NIL this year will reflect where they end up in the conference, and it'll be up to them whether they can outperform that.
I feel confident that Richard Pitino is a great hire. He's the Big East is a perfect place for him with just all the connections with his father and his Minnesota tenure, getting a 5 seed and a 10 seed at Minnesota is no joke at all. And then to quickly turn that thing around at New Mexico and make them a really good team the last 2 years. He's obviously a really good coach. He's much more experienced than his last power gig, and I'm excited for him and for Xavier. So, Paul, any parting words before getting you out of here?
No, I think I think we hit on everything, Christian. I always appreciate you having me on, and let's do it again sometime.
Thanks, Paul.